The battlefield was shaking with fire and smoke. Human soldiers and alien warriors clashed in the ruined city. The sky burned red with the glow of explosions, and the ground shook as artillery shells hit nearby. Daniel, a human soldier, pushed forward with his squad, his rifle heavy in his hands. He had seen battles before, but this war was different. This was not Earth, this was not home. It was an alien world filled with strange towers, broken statues, and skies lit by 3 moons. Daniel's squad was moving carefully, scanning every shadow. The enemy was skilled, fast, and deadly. They called them the Bravery, tall reptilian beings with armored skin and glowing red eyes. For weeks, the humans had fought them across this planet. The war was brutal, and Daniel had stopped counting the number of friends he had lost. Every step forward was a step taken on broken bodies and shattered hopes. The order was simple: secure the city ruins and hold the ground. Daniel followed orders, but his heart carried a weight he could not shake. He had not joined the army to conquer. He had joined to protect. Yet in this endless war, it was hard to remember what protection even meant. Suddenly, a distant whistle cut through the chaos. Daniel's instinct screamed, "Artillery fire incoming." "Cover!" he shouted, diving behind broken stone walls. The blast shook the air, throwing dust and fire into the streets. Screams echoed as human soldiers and alien fighters were torn apart by the impact. Daniel coughed, pulling himself up, ears ringing. And then he saw her, a figure stumbling in the smoke, her body fragile and small compared to the armored warriors around. She looked nothing like the reptilian Bravery. Her skin glowed faintly in the dust, pale silver under the firelight. Her eyes shone like 2 blue stars, wide with fear. She wore no armor, only a long cloak torn and dirty. She did not belong here, not on the front lines of war. Daniel froze for a moment, trying to make sense of it. Was she a civilian, a refugee, or a trick of the enemy? Another whistle pierced the air, closer this time. Another shell was falling, and she was standing right in its path, frozen in terror. Without thinking, Daniel moved. He threw down his rifle and sprinted, his boots pounding against the cracked stone. The air screamed as the shell dropped. Daniel's training told him he would never make it. But something deeper, something human, told him he had to try. He reached her in the final second. Wrapping his arms around her, he threw both of them to the ground. The world exploded. Heat, fire, and light swallowed them. The shock wave slammed into his body like a wall of iron. Pain ripped through him, his armor breaking, his back burning, but his arms stayed locked around the alien woman, shielding her from the blast. The noise faded into silence, broken only by ringing in his ears. Dust and smoke swirled around them, covering the world in gray. Daniel gasped for air, his body trembling. The weight of rubble pressed against his back, but he did not let go of her. Slowly, he felt movement. The woman shifted in his arms, her breath unsteady. She pulled back just enough to look at him, her glowing blue eyes meeting his brown ones. She did not speak, but the expression on her face was enough. Shock, confusion, and something else, something close to wonder. She had expected death, but instead a human soldier had thrown himself in front of the fire to protect her. Daniel coughed again, forcing words out of his dry throat. "You're safe now?" he whispered, though his voice was weak. She blinked at him, her lips parting as if she wanted to reply. But no sound came. The battlefield around them was still raging, explosions and gunfire echoing through the ruins. Daniel's squad was nowhere to be seen, scattered by the blast. He struggled to stand, pain stabbing through his ribs. Still, he held onto her hand, pulling her with him. For some reason, he could not let her go. He did not even know who she was, or why she was here. But something in his gut told him she was important, far more important than he realized. Another wave of fire shook the ground, and Daniel forced himself to move. He half-dragged, half-carried her away from the collapsing street. His legs felt heavy, but his determination burned stronger than the pain. Behind them, rubble buried the spot where they had just been. If he had been a second slower, both of them would have been gone. The woman looked back once, her eyes filled with strange light. Then she looked at Daniel again, as if studying him. There was fear in her, yes, but also something deeper, something that whispered this moment would not be forgotten. Daniel didn't know it yet, but the life he had just saved was no ordinary life. And the woman whose hand he now held was not just another survivor. She was someone the galaxy would kneel before. But for now, to him, she was simply a fragile being he had chosen to protect. And that choice was about to change everything. Daniel opened his eyes slowly, the world spinning around him. His body felt heavy, every breath sharp with pain. For a moment he thought he was still lying in the rubble of the battlefield, waiting for death to claim him. But when his vision cleared, he realized he was no longer surrounded by fire and smoke. He was lying on a soft bed made of strange glowing fabric, in a chamber that hummed with a quiet energy. The ceiling above him was carved with symbols that shimmered like stars. Walls of crystal curved around the chamber, alive with faint light. The air was warm and smelled faintly of herbs, calming his aching lungs. Daniel tried to sit up, but a sharp pain in his ribs forced him back down. His armor was gone, his weapons gone too, replaced by a simple cloth wrap across his chest and arms. He realized then, someone had treated his wounds. Someone had saved him after the blast. And then he saw her, the same alien woman he had thrown himself over, the one with glowing blue eyes. She was sitting by his side, watching him in silence. Her silver hair fell around her face like strands of moonlight, her cloak still torn and dusty from the battlefield. But here in this strange place, she looked almost otherworldly, a presence too calm for war. Daniel blinked at her, trying to speak, but his throat was dry. Before he could force out words, she lifted a cup made of crystal and held it to his lips. The water inside glowed faintly, cool and sweet as it touched his tongue. He drank slowly, his strength returning bit by bit. "Thank you," he managed to whisper, his voice rough but clear enough. The woman tilted her head slightly, as if she understood, though she still said nothing. Her silence made him uneasy. Was she unable to speak his language? Or was she choosing not to? Daniel wanted answers, but more than that, he wanted to know why she had been there, in the middle of a war zone, unarmed and unprotected. He pushed himself up again, ignoring the pain, his soldier's instincts refusing to rest. "Who are you?" he asked, his tone steady though his body trembled. The woman's eyes narrowed slightly, her gaze unreadable. Then, finally, she spoke, her voice soft and melodic, carrying an accent unlike anything he had ever heard. "My name is Liara," she said, the word echoing gently in the chamber. Liara. The name lingered in Daniel's mind, strange yet beautiful. It felt important, though he could not explain why. Still, it gave him something to hold on to, something human to call her by. "I'm Daniel," he replied, his voice quiet but firm. For a moment, silence stretched between them, the only sound the faint hum of the glowing walls. Daniel tried again, this time slower. "Why were you there, Liara, on the battlefield?" Her eyes flickered with emotion, fear, hesitation, and something deeper. She looked away, refusing to answer, as if the truth was too dangerous to share. Instead, she stood and moved to the far side of the chamber, placing her hand against a crystal wall. The surface rippled like water under her touch, showing faint images, shadows of war, burning cities, ships falling from the sky. Daniel watched, confused, realizing she was showing him something, not with words but with images, a vision of her world under siege, her people suffering, her life threatened. Daniel clenched his fists, anger rising in his chest. He had seen enough war to recognize desperation. Whoever Liara was, she was more than just a random survivor. She had been important enough for someone to save, important enough to protect. And now she was tied to him, because he had been the one who shielded her from death. But as Daniel studied her, he noticed something else. Every time she walked through the chamber, every time her hand brushed against the walls, the light shifted in response. It was as though the entire place was alive, and she was its heartbeat. There was power in her, hidden but undeniable, and Daniel's soldier instincts whispered that she was keeping something from him, something far greater than she let him see. He wanted to demand answers, to know why she looked at him with such strange intensity. But exhaustion dragged at his body, his wounds reminding him he was still weak. So he leaned back against the bed, his voice low. "Liara, I don't know who you are, but I know one thing," he said, his eyes locking onto hers. "You're not safe out there, not alone, and until I find out the truth, I'll keep you safe." Liara froze, staring at him with an expression he could not read. Her lips parted as though she wanted to argue, but the words never came. Instead, she lowered her gaze, almost as if in respect. For the first time, Daniel noticed it. The smallest bow of her head, subtle but filled with meaning. He didn't know it yet, but in that simple gesture lay the beginning of a bond that would shake the galaxy. As he drifted into uneasy sleep, Daniel thought only of survival. He did not realize he had just promised protection to someone far more important than he could imagine. Someone whose name was whispered not as a stranger, but as a queen. And though the truth was hidden for now, destiny was already unfolding around him. Quietly and without mercy, Daniel's strength was slowly returning, though his body still carried the pain of the blast. The healers of this strange place had done more for him than human medicine could have. Their glowing herbs and crystal tools sealing wounds that should have taken weeks to recover. But even as his body healed, his mind remained restless. Questions burned inside him. Who exactly was Liara? Why had she been on the battlefield? And why did the healers look at her with such quiet reverence? He noticed it first when he walked through the crystal halls. Every alien he passed bowed their heads slightly when Liara entered, their eyes lowering with respect. None of them looked at him that way, only at her. Daniel had been a soldier long enough to recognize signs of authority. Liara was no ordinary refugee, no lost wanderer saved by chance. She was someone important, maybe too important. One night, Daniel could not sleep. The chamber's walls glowed faintly like the light of distant stars, but his thoughts kept him awake. He rose quietly and stepped into the hall, following the sound of soft voices. The air was cool, carrying a faint hum as though the very stones were alive. He moved carefully, not wanting to disturb anyone, but the voices grew clearer, echoing from a vast chamber ahead. Daniel stopped in the shadows, his soldier's instincts warning him to stay hidden. Through the archway, he saw Liara standing in the center of a great hall. Around her were tall figures dressed in robes that shimmered like liquid silver. Their faces were sharp, their eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. They formed a circle, their voices rising in hushed tones. The word queen echoed among them, soft but unmistakable. Daniel's heart pounded. Queen. The word repeated in his mind, shaking the pieces of the puzzle into place. Liara was not just important. She was royalty. The woman he had shielded from a blast, the woman he had sworn to protect, was the leader of an entire people. Liara's head was bowed as the robed figure spoke, but her posture was strong, filled with quiet authority. Daniel could not hear every word, but fragments reached him. War grows closer, one said. The Dravari will not stop until the throne falls, another whispered. Your safety, my queen, is our only hope, came a third voice, heavy with fear. Daniel clenched his fists. It made sense now why she had been on the battlefield, why she had been unarmed. Perhaps she had been trying to reach her people, or perhaps she had been targeted. But what struck him most was the burden she carried, an entire civilization depending on her survival. And she had trusted him, a human soldier, to protect her. When the meeting ended, Liara turned, her steps soft but certain. Daniel stepped back into the shadows, but it was too late. Her glowing blue eyes found him. For a long moment she said nothing, only studied him in silence. Then she walked toward him, her cloak trailing softly across the crystal floor. "You heard," she said quietly, her voice calm but edged with something heavier. Daniel nodded, unable to lie. "I did," he admitted, his tone steady. "You're a queen." The words felt strange in his mouth, like something out of story, yet they were true. Liara sighed softly, lowering her gaze. "I wanted to tell you, but timing is delicate," she said, her voice carrying both strength and sorrow. "My people are hunted, my throne is threatened, and the galaxy watches for weakness." Her eyes lifted again, piercing into his. "When you saved me, Daniel, you did not know who I was," she continued. "You acted not for a crown, but for a life." Daniel felt a weight in his chest at her words. He had saved her because it was the right thing to do, because no one deserved to die helpless in the fire of war. But now he understood the scale of his action. He had not just saved a stranger, he had saved a queen, and that meant the galaxy itself might shift because of one choice, one moment of instinct. "You should have told me," Daniel said, his voice firm, though not unkind. Liara tilted her head slightly, her lips forming a faint, almost sorrowful smile. "Would you have acted differently if you had known?" she asked. Daniel hesitated, then shook his head. "No," he admitted. "I would have done the same." For a moment, their eyes locked, the silence between them heavy with unspoken truth. From then on, Daniel noticed even more. Every time Liara walked through the halls, voices lowered, footsteps slowed, and eyes followed with devotion. Every bow, every whispered title, every flicker of light that seemed to bend toward her, it all confirmed the truth. He was walking beside a ruler, a living symbol of hope, and yet, when she looked at him, it was not as a subject or a soldier, but as something else entirely. Daniel did not fully understand it yet, but he felt it growing, a bond that stretched beyond duty, beyond survival. He had entered her world as an outsider, a human in a war that was not his own, but now he was bound to her by choice and by destiny. And in the quiet of the secret court, Daniel realized one thing. Protecting Liara was no longer just an act of war. It was the beginning of something far greater. The calm of the crystal halls did not last long. Daniel had begun to feel the strange palace was safe, a hidden place far from the battlefield. But war has a way of finding even the strongest walls. And for Liara, queen of a threatened people, peace was only ever an illusion. It began with a deep rumble in the distance. Daniel was walking the hall with Liara when the sound rolled through the floor beneath their feet. The glow of the crystal walls flickered as if the palace itself had shuddered in fear. He froze instantly, instincts honed by years of battle roaring inside him. "That's artillery," he said sharply, scanning the chamber. Liara's eyes widened, her calm mask breaking for the first time since he had known her. "They have found us," she whispered. An alarm rang through the halls, a deep chime that vibrated through the stone. Alien guards rushed into position, their weapons glowing with crackling energy. Through the open crystal arches, Daniel saw the skies outside. What had once been glowing with soft light was now burning with fire. Enemy ships, black and jagged like blades, descended from the clouds, their cannons spitting red light across the city below. The Dravari had come, and they had come in force. "Move," Daniel ordered, his soldier's voice cutting through the chaos. Liara hesitated and used to being commanded, but there was no time to argue. He grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the deeper halls as blasts shook the palace. Shards of crystal rained down from the ceiling as corridors cracked and crumbled. Alien citizens screamed in terror, rushing past them as guards tried to form a defense. But Daniel knew what this was. It wasn't just an attack. It was a strike meant to kill the queen. They ran through twisting corridors, each turn filled with smoke and fire. Liara moved with grace, her cloak trailing, but Daniel kept close, his body a shield in front of hers. He had no rifle, no armor, but his instincts were enough. Every explosion, every tremor in the walls, told him where to move. Every second counted, every step was survival. At one point, a section of the ceiling collapsed. Daniel shoved Liara forward, diving over her as crystal boulders smashed where she had stood. Dust filled the air, choking his lungs, but he forced himself up, pulling her with him. Her eyes shone in the smoke, wide with both fear and something else. "You should not risk yourself for me," she gasped. Daniel gave her a grim smile. "That's what I do," he said simply. The palace was falling apart, enemy fire ripping through its towers. Through a broken window, Daniel saw the city burning below. Civilians scattered as Dravari soldiers landed in the streets, their scaled armor glinting red in the firelight. Ships strafed overhead, their beams tearing through homes and bridges. It was slaughter, and in the middle of it stood Liara, the one the Dravari truly wanted. They reached a courtyard split by fire, alien guards forming a last desperate defense. The enemy broke through in waves, reptilian warriors rushing forward with blades that glowed like molten iron. Daniel picked up a fallen weapon from a dead guard, its weight strange but familiar enough. He swung it just as the first Dravari charged, cutting the warrior down. Blood sprayed across the broken stones, the fight truly beginning. Liara stood behind him, her hands trembling as she raised them slightly. Daniel noticed a strange energy ripple through the air. Blue light flickered at her fingertips, as if power was trying to escape. But she clenched her fists, forcing it back, choosing not to unleash it. He didn't understand why, but he knew one thing. She was holding back, and that meant her secret was even greater than he imagined. The fight raged on, Daniel cutting down enemy after enemy, his body burning with exhaustion, but his mind sharp. He blocked strikes, shoved Liara out of danger, and refused to let the line break. For every step the Dravari took, he forced them 2 steps back. His muscles screamed, his lungs burned, but he would not give in, not while she was behind him, not while her life depended on him. A sudden explosion rocked the courtyard, throwing both of them to the ground. Daniel's vision blurred, his ears ringing. Through the haze, he saw towering figures entering, larger and stronger than the rest. Elite Dravari, their armor black and edged with crimson, their eyes burning like coals. The guards faltered, hope fading as the giants advanced. Daniel staggered to his feet, lifting his weapon, his body swaying but his stance unbroken. Liara rose beside him, her cloak torn, her eyes glowing brighter than ever. For a moment, time seemed to stop, the battlefield holding its breath, and Daniel realized something he had always known in his gut. This was no ordinary woman, no helpless refugee, not even just a queen. There was power inside her, vast and terrifying. It was about to awaken. But still, she looked at him first, as if waiting, as if needing his choice. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice steady despite the storm around them. "Will you stand with me?" His grip tightened on the weapon, his jaw set. "Until my last breath," he said firmly, and with those words, the battle truly began. The courtyard was drowning in smoke and fire. Daniel stood with his weapon raised, his body aching, every breath sharp with pain. Beside him, Liara stood tall, her silver hair glowing in the flames, her cloak torn, her eyes burning with hidden light. The Dravari elites advanced, towering figures wrapped in black armor, their blades glowing like rivers of fire. The alien guards around them faltered, their courage breaking under the weight of the enemy. Daniel had faced death before, but this moment was different. This was not just about survival. It was about protecting her, the one life that seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 more. He planted his feet firmly, refusing to step back. "Stay behind me," he said, his voice hard. But Liara did not move, her eyes fixed on the advancing enemies. The Dravari elites roared, their heavy steps shaking the stones. Daniel lunged forward, swinging the stolen weapon with all his strength. He He cut through the first warrior, sparks flying as steel clashed against alien armor. The impact rattled his bones, but he forced himself onward, blocking another strike, countering with sheer determination. Two more elites joined the fight, their blades cutting arcs of fire through the smoke. Daniel barely dodged, the heat searing across his cheek. He fought like a man possessed, but deep down he knew there were too many, and his body could not last much longer. Then it happened. One of the elites raised his massive blade high, aiming straight for Daniel's chest. Daniel lifted his weapon to block, but his arms trembled, his strength fading. The blow would have crushed him, ended him in an instant. But before the strike could land, a blinding blue light erupted between them. The world seemed to freeze. Daniel blinked against the glow, his eyes wide. The Dravari warrior staggered back, his armor cracking under the force of invisible energy. And at the center of it stood Liara, her hands raised, her entire body shining with power. Blue flames of energy spiraled around her, lifting her cloak, making her seem like a figure of legend. Her voice rang out, calm and commanding, filled with a strength Daniel had never heard before. "Enough," she said, and the sound carried like thunder across the battlefield. The Dravari froze, their burning eyes widening with sudden fear. The alien guards dropped to their knees, their voices trembling. "My queen," they whispered, as if the truth had been revealed at last. Daniel's heart slammed in his chest as the pieces fell together. Liara was not only a leader, not just a symbol. She was their queen, a ruler with power that bent the very air around her. Energy flowed from her hands like a storm unleashed. She raised one arm, and a wave of blue light struck the elites, sending them crashing into the walls, their blades shattering into fragments. The ground trembled under her power, stones cracking, fire bending away from her presence. She moved with grace and fury, each strike of energy perfectly controlled. Daniel could only watch in awe as she drove back the enemy, her power greater than any weapon he had ever seen. The Dravari tried to regroup, their elites roaring in defiance. But Liara's eyes blazed brighter, and with a single gesture, she sent them flying, their armored bodies crushed under invisible weight. The battle shifted in an instant. The impossible had become reality. The enemy who had seemed unstoppable now trembled under the might of their queen. When the courtyard finally fell silent, only smoke and scattered embers remained. The guards slowly rose, their heads bowed deeply, their voices rising in reverence. "All hail the queen," they cried, their words echoing across the ruins. Daniel stood frozen, his weapon still in hand, his breath uneven. He had known she was important, but not this, not the queen herself, not a being with the power to command the stars. Liara turned toward him, her glowing aura fading slowly, though her eyes still shimmered with light. "You know the truth now," she said softly, her voice filled with both sorrow and strength. Daniel stared at her, his mind racing. "You're their queen," he whispered, almost disbelieving. Liara nodded, her gaze never leaving his. "Yes, I am," she said, "and you saved me without knowing." For a long moment, silence stretched between them, the flames crackling softly around their feet. Daniel felt the weight of what had just been revealed. The woman he had thrown himself over, the one he had promised to protect, was not just another life in this war. She was the heart of an entire empire, the hope of her people. And yet, when she looked at him, it was not as a ruler looking at a subject. It was as someone who had been saved, not as a queen, but as a person. "You risked everything for me," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "No one has done that without asking for something in return." Daniel shook his head, his jaw tight. "I didn't do it for power," he replied firmly. "I did it because it was right." Liara studied him, her expression unreadable, but her eyes softened. "You are different, Daniel," she whispered. "Perhaps that is why fate brought you here. As the night closed around them, Daniel realized his path had changed forever. He was no longer just a soldier lost in an alien war. He was the protector of a queen, a witness to power beyond human understanding. And though the future was uncertain, one truth burned in his chest. He would stand by her side, no matter what came. The fires in the courtyard had burned low, leaving only smoke drifting into the night sky. The city around the palace lay in ruins, its streets filled with the cries of survivors and the silence of the fallen. Daniel stood among the wreckage, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths, his hands still shaking from the battle. But his eyes were fixed on Liara, the woman who had revealed herself not only as a survivor, not only as someone he had saved, but as the queen of an entire people. The alien guards kept their distance, bowing deeply whenever Liara passed. Their whispers filled the air, voices calling her titles Daniel did not understand, words heavy with reverence and fear. Yet she did not look at them. She looked only at him. Her glowing blue eyes carried a weight that pierced through the smoke and the ruin. Daniel felt it pressing on him, the unspoken truth that what had happened here tonight had tied them together in ways he had never imagined. When dawn broke, Daniel found himself in the throne chamber. It was a place unlike anything he had seen before. Tall arches carved from crystal, light flowing like water down the walls. A seat of power shaped not from gold, but from living stone that pulsed faintly with energy. Liara stood before the throne, not sitting on it, her cloak torn, her face pale from exhaustion. She had unleashed a storm of power, but even a queen was not untouched by the cost. Her hands trembled faintly at her sides, though her voice remained steady as she spoke. "You saved me when you did not know who I was," she said, her tone quiet but firm. "And even after you learn the truth, you stay by my side." Daniel shifted uneasily, standing tall, but unsure how to answer. "I did what any soldier would do," he said, his voice low. "You needed protection." Liara shook her head slowly, her silver hair catching the morning light. "No," she replied. "Many would have turned away. Many would have left me to fate, but you chose differently." She stepped closer, her eyes never leaving his. "I offer you a place at my side," she said, her words carrying the weight of both command and plea. "Not as a guard, not as a servant, but as a protector I can trust, someone who sees me not as a crown, but as a person." Daniel froze, her words striking him harder than any blade. A place at the side of a queen, a role that would bind him to her people, her throne, her destiny. The choice was heavy, heavier than any order he had ever received. He thought of Earth, of his home, of the faces of comrades long gone. He thought of humanity, a species feared by the galaxy, seen as dangerous and unpredictable. If he accepted, he would no longer just be a soldier of Earth. He would be part of something far larger, something alien. Liara watched him in silence, waiting, her expression calm, but her eyes filled with something vulnerable. She could command armies, destroy enemies, bend energy to her will. But she could not command this, his choice. Daniel's chest tightened, his thoughts torn between loyalty to his own kind and the bond he felt growing with her. The bond of trust, of sacrifice, of something deeper he dared not name. He closed his eyes for a moment, drawing a breath. When he opened them again, his voice was steady. "Liara," he said, "I don't care about your crown or your throne. I care about what's right, and what's right is protecting you, because without you, these people have nothing." Her lips parted slightly, her gaze softening as his words sank in. "But understand this," he continued, his tone firm. "If I stand by your side, I will not be your servant. I will be your equal. I will protect you not because of what you are, but because of who you are." For a moment, silence filled the chamber, broken only by the hum of the living stone. Then, slowly, Liara bowed her head, the smallest gesture, but one filled with meaning. "Then let it be so," she said softly. "Daniel, protector of the queen, and ally of my people." The guards lowered their heads, even deeper, the weight of the moment sinking into the crystal halls. Daniel felt the burden settle on his shoulders, heavy but unbreakable. He had made his choice, and there would be no turning back. The path before him was dangerous, filled with enemies who would see him as a traitor to his own species. But it was also a path of purpose, one he had never truly felt until now. That night, as the stars rose over the broken city, Daniel stood beside Liara on the balcony of the palace. The ruins below were lit by fires, but also by the lights of survivors rebuilding, refusing to surrender. Liara's voice was quiet, almost carried away by the wind. "The galaxy will not understand," she whispered. "A human standing with me will be seen as a threat, as a challenge to everything they believe." Daniel looked at her, his expression firm. "Let them see it," he said. "Let them know humanity doesn't run, doesn't bow, we stand." She turned to him then, her eyes shimmering with something beyond duty. Perhaps respect, perhaps gratitude, perhaps something deeper still. And in that moment, Daniel knew his choice was not just about survival, not just about war. It was about a future, uncertain and terrifying, but one he was ready to face. Because he was no longer just a soldier lost in an alien war. He was the protector of a queen, and the bond between them would shape the galaxy to come. The days after the attack were heavy with silence. The palace had survived, but the scars of the battle still marked every wall and street. Daniel walked the city often, watching survivors rebuild broken homes with trembling hands. The people looked at him differently now, not with suspicion, but with quiet awe. Word had spread. This human had shielded their queen, had stood against the Dravari when even their strongest had fallen. But Daniel did not care for glory. What mattered to him was Liara. She moved through the ruins with calm determination, speaking to her people, offering strength where only fear had been before. Everywhere she went, heads bowed, voices whispered, "My queen." Yet when she returned to the quiet halls, when the weight of her crown pressed too heavily, her eyes always searched for Daniel. It was not loyalty alone that bound them now, but something deeper, something unspoken. The Dravari were not finished. Their defeat at the palace was only a setback, and scouts reported fleets gathering at the edge of the system. A storm was coming, greater than before. Liara stood before her council, her voice strong, her plan clear. They would not run, they would not hide. For the first time in years, her people would fight not with fear, but with hope. Daniel stood at her side as the council bowed. He was no statesman, no diplomat, but his presence mattered. He was proof that humanity could be more than the galaxy's nightmare. He was proof that even a soldier from Earth could stand beside a queen and fight for something greater than himself. When the day of the final battle came, the skies above the city darkened with enemy ships. The Dravari descended in endless waves, their cannons burning the heavens. But the city did not break. From its towers, energy shields flared to life, glowing blue under Liara's command. Her people took to the walls, weapons ready, voices steady, and at the front, Daniel stood, armor-patched, weapon in hand. The battle began with fire and thunder. Dravari ships rained destruction, their soldiers storming the ground in endless waves. Daniel fought at the gates, cutting through scaled warriors with every strike. His body burned with exhaustion, but his will did not bend. Every time he thought he would fall, he saw Liara above, her hands raised, her power flowing like a storm across the battlefield. She was not fighting alone. He was her shield, her anchor, the one who kept her grounded even as she unleashed fury that shook the sky. Together, they became something unstoppable. The soldiers whispered as they fought, the queen and her human. It was more than a battle cry. It was a symbol for every Dravari that fell. The people rose higher, their courage growing like flame. Daniel fought back to back with Liara, their movements in perfect rhythm, his blade where her power did not reach, her light where his strength faltered. Enemies who had once laughed at humans now trembled, unable to break them. The turning point came when the Dravari warlord himself descended, a towering figure clad in crimson armor, his roar shaking the battlefield. He swung a massive blade of molten steel, cutting through stone as though it were air. The defenders faltered, hope fading at the sight of him. But Daniel stepped forward, planting his feet, his weapon raised. "I'll hold him," he shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. Liara turned, her eyes wide with fear. "No, you'll die," she cried. Daniel shook his head, his jaw set. "Then I'll die standing," he said firmly. The warlord struck, the force nearly breaking Daniel's arms. But he refused to fall, parrying, dodging, striking back with every ounce of strength left in him. It was not skill alone. It was will, the refusal to surrender. The Dravari roared in frustration, but then light burst across the field. Liara stepped forward, her power burning brighter than ever, her voice carrying across the sky. "You will not touch him," she declared, her energy surging into a storm of pure force. The warlord staggered under her power, his armor cracking. Daniel seized the moment, driving his blade deep into the enemy's chest. The warlord roared one last time before collapsing, the ground trembling as he fell. Silence spread across the battlefield, broken only by the cries of the Dravari retreating. The impossible had happened. The enemy was broken, their fleets scattering into the stars. When the smoke cleared, the people raised their voices in victory. They knelt before Liara, their queen, their savior. But their eyes also turned to Daniel, the human who had fought beside her. No longer an outsider, no longer a stranger, he was part of their legend. That night, under the light of the 3 moons, Liara stood on the palace balcony with Daniel at her side. The city was alive again, voices singing, fires burning not in ruin, but in celebration. She looked at him, her eyes soft, her voice quiet. "You changed everything," she whispered, "not just for me, but for my people." Daniel shook his head, a faint smile on his lips. "No," he said, "we did it together." For a moment, there was no war, no crown, no throne. Only 2 souls bound by choice, by trust, by something greater than either had expected. And as the stars stretched endlessly above them, Daniel realized this was not the end. This was the beginning of a new story, a new alliance, a new legend. The galaxy would never forget the human who stood with the alien queen, and neither would she.